clase? Anisbel, ¿cómo estás? ¿Estás pensativa?
Hola, teacher, ¿cómo está?
Bien, bien. ¿Y eso que está guindado ahí atrás, qué es eso? No quiero decir la palabra. ¿Qué es eso que está guindado ahí atrás en la...
Esto, mis carteras.
Ah, ya, yo pensé que eran sostenes.
No, eso está en otra parte.
Parecía forma como esa parte de atrás que se pone aquí, no sé, cosas de mujeres. Dios mío, tienes una, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco carteras. Blancas, todas son blancas.
O sea, tengo de paleta de color para que me combine con mis outfits.
Ya,
Así.
bueno, ahí se ven como blancas, todas son claras. Una, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco. Y de repente una...
O sea, una está en una bolsa, otra está allá, otra
Ajá.
es negra,
Ah,
otra es
ya,
lila.
listo, pues ya. Ok, olvidémonos de eso, vamos a comenzar. Aunque todo eso se está grabando. Okay, chicos, let's begin the class. Okay, this is something, I have to be funny because, can you imagine a class boring, serious? No, no, that's not my kind of thing. Okay, so let's watch this. I think today I brought like 3 videos. Let me see. No, this is Voorhees, or this is Voorhees. Oh, Leonardo DiCaprio, Leonardo da Vinci. Introduction geography. Okay, this one. Okay, yeah. Let's watch. Let me see. Hold on, hold on. I think. Aha, here it is. Here it is. Let me open this my Hotmail. Aha, here it is. Here's I have all the videos that I wanted to play for you guys. Okay, let's begin with this video. Okay. I'm trying to open it. Open it. It's a little bit slow, but anyway. Come on, hurry up, up. Here it is. Okay.
Hello, historians. This is Mr. Fredo. Here we go, episode 2 in our study of the Renaissance.
Now, this video talks about, it says Renaissance, how it starts. Okay, they try to explain how this Renaissance start. Okay, so
for our quick mini lessons, an important question to ask: how does this start? Prior to this time period in Western Europe's history was around 1,000 years of just death, disaster, and misery within the Middle Ages. So how does this completely different time period, when the light goes back on and people in Europe and Europe as a whole come back to life, how does that happen? Well, there isn't really a simple answer for that. It's really a combination of several factors that independently come in contact with each other or find ways to intermix that ends up creating this new time period. It's kind of like actually how like middle school relationships start. You have a crush on someone, so then you tell your friend to go talk to them, and then that person hears about it, so they tell another friend on whether or not they like you back, and if they like you back, then they bring in someone else to kind of set up the first time that you're going to talk to each other. It's a really roundabout way of getting something to happen. That's kind of how the Renaissance starts as well. So we focus on 4 main factors that causes the shift from the Middle Ages to this new time period, the Renaissance. And it all starts with the end of the Black Death. Until this Black Death doesn't go away, Europe has no chance of fighting out of the Middle Ages because of the destruction that it caused. Because people started to isolate themselves and they stopped trading and they stopped interacting, that allowed the disease to effectively die out throughout Western Europe to the point where it wasn't going to spread as massively as it did before. So it kind of gives them a breath of, no pun intended, fresh air where they can get back to doing things. As soon as that isolation has taken into effect and the disease has died out, people move back into the cities. And that's when people start to talk again. They start to collaborate again. They start to be able to interact and come up with new ideas that they couldn't do as long as the Black Death was around. That's really the first step. Second big event is the rediscovery of Greek and Roman ideas that had been destroyed throughout Europe but were preserved in the Holy Land, and they're rediscovered during the Crusades. All of those great Greek and Roman ideas that focused on science and artwork and engineering and not just about religion, they had been destroyed in Europe over the course of hundreds of years for a variety of factors. One, just because of the simple destruction that occurred throughout the Middle Ages. But two, also because of the Catholic Church would take those books, and if they contradicted Catholic Church teachings in any way, they would be set on fire. So those ideas and those philosophies and beliefs, they were destroyed throughout Western Europe, but they were preserved in the Holy Land, because this is an area that wasn't affected by the death and destruction of the Middle Ages in Western Europe. And this is a place where the Greeks had set up colonies near, and this is a place where the Romans had conquered. So when the Europeans travel there, they find all of the, remember, the Crusades took place over a couple hundred years. Over time, they come in contact and come back in contact with these ideas that they never even knew existed. And over a course of a long period of time, those ideas are brought back to Western Europe. And when put in use and put in place, and they become actually used, it creates a different world, because instead of just focusing on religion, now they're focusing on Greek and Roman ideas about science and art and architecture. And again, it creates a complete shift in thinking. Number 3, maybe the most important invention in the history of the world, the Gutenberg printing press. Prior to this printer, that's what it is. Books were extremely rare in Western Europe, and they were extremely expensive because there were so few of them. They cost a lot of money just to own, and most of them were only in Latin. The Gutenberg printing press changes all of that. Instead of having to copy these books in Latin by hand like monks would do in monasteries, the Gutenberg press acts like printers do today. Now, obviously not as fast as some of the printers that we have now, but still much faster than the going standard of copying these books by hand. And they can be printed in native languages, so languages that people actually understood. So if you're from Italy, you could get a book in Italian. If you were from Spain, you could get a book in Spanish. And it could be about all different types of topics, about science, about math, about engineering, about artwork, you name it. All of those were available because the Gutenberg press allowed so many different books to be printed. And perhaps most importantly, because there's more books, the price goes way down. Now that there's so many, they're not as expensive, and that gives the population of Europe a greater accessibility to knowledge. This is essentially like the internet of the 1400s by the time it's created in 1450. Major game changer with this invention. And then lastly, guilds. Guilds are these organizations of people who all do the same thing and really care about the quality of the work that they produce. So there could be any type of guilds. There could be sculpting guilds. There could be painting guilds. There could be guilds for finance or banking. But all of these people are working in the same environment, and they're competing against each other because they know in order to be accepted into that guild, their work has to be of the highest quality, because the only way you were going to be taken seriously as a professional, regardless of what your profession was if you were accepted into a guild. That gave you credibility. That was a big deal. So the guilds, and because of the competition created within a guild, it raises the quality of everything that's produced throughout Western Europe in a big, big way. One of the decisions you're going to have to make as a historian is which of these factors is most responsible for the start of the Renaissance. And it's a tough choice, because as you really examine these, you'll start to see that there's a lot of overlap between these 4 main factors in the shift from Middle Ages to this great time period, the Renaissance.
Okay, it was a little bit long, but anyway. Now, in this period of time, there were 2 very important characters here in this period. One of those was Mr. Michelangelo. And Michelangelo is not the one from the Ninja Turtles. That's not the Michelangelo. Michelangelo, no, the other one who was a painter and a sculptor, okay? A very important character in those ages. And the other one was Leonardo DiCaprio, no, Leonardo da Vinci, okay? Now over here I have a video that talks about his, I think this is the same one. Let me see. You got this in English, geography, and over he says, yes, it's the same. I'm gonna play this one, okay? Let's pay attention.
Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, and scientist. He was born on April 15, 1452, in the town of Vinci, Italy. His father's name was Piero da Vinci, and mother's name was Caterina. Not much is known about his childhood, other than his father was wealthy and had a number of wives. Very little is known about Leonardo da Vinci's early life, and, for many years, about the age of 14, he became an apprentice to a famous artist named Verrocchio. He learned to paint and sculpt under him, and was also taught the basics of metallurgy, drafting, chemistry, botany, cartography, and carpentry at his workshop. He collaborated with Verrocchio on a number of paintings, such as the Baptism of Christ. By 1472, Leonardo qualified as a master in the Guild of St. Luke, an association of artists and doctors. One of his earliest drawings is Arno Valley, a sketch of the valley of the same name, which was made on August 5, 1473, with the help of Verrocchio. In 1478, he received two important painting commissions, viz. Saint Jerome in the Wildernesses and Adoration of the Magi, both of which were never completed. From 1478 to 1480, he painted Madonna of the Carnation, an oil painting with the central motifs of young Mary and baby Jesus on her lap, and a carnation in her left hand. The next important works were The Virgin of the Rocks and Madonna of the Rocks, which were similar in style, but differed in composition. He was commissioned to create a massive horse statue for a patron. One of his greatest paintings, The Last Supper, was commissioned to him by the Duke Lodovico Sforza, and Leonardo worked on it from 1495 to 1498. In the year 1500, Leonardo was appointed as the military architect and engineer. In 1502, he entered the service of Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, and created a map of Cesare City, at a time when maps were not very common. In 1503, Leonardo went to Florence and began painting a mural of the Battle of Anghiari, which took him 2 years to complete. He started painting his masterpiece, Mona Lisa, also called La Gioconda, around the same time, and completed it in 1506. In 1506, he returned to Milan, and many of his prominent pupils began to work with him. He was obsessed with flight and had plans for building something similar to a helicopter in 1502. He wrote several books throughout his lifetime, including Codex on the Flight of Birds in 1505, a scientific palimpsest containing 18 folios. The Vitruvian Man is a drawing created by Leonardo da Vinci in 1490 and depicts two superimposed positions of a male figure. He was not attracted to women, but developed a close friendship with his patrons, Cecilia Gallerani, and the two Este sisters, Isabella and Beatrice. Vinci died on 2 May 1519 in Amboise, Kingdom of France, at the age of 67.
Okay, that was Leonardo da Vinci. Some people thought that he was gay, but we don't know for sure. But anyway, he was a very intelligent and creative person. Okay, now let's talk about, in this video, talks about the other one, the other very important character in those.
¿Necesitas un logo memorable para tu marca?
Michelangelo.
Entra al creador de logos de Wix y empiézalo ahora.
though the Mona Lisa may be the most famous artwork in the world, I would argue this bit of painting would be a close second. You've got to check this out. Support provided by the Glick Fund, a CICF fund focused on inspiring philanthropy. Additional support provided by the Crystal DeHaan Family Foundation in honor of the children and families of Crystal House. Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni, we'll just call him Michelangelo, was born March 6, 1475 in Caprice, Italy.
Buongiorno, or whatever.
Yeah, he wasn't always the happiest artist, but we'll get back to that later. Michelangelo had 4 brothers, and his father was a magistrate, and his mother stayed at home with the kids. Now, when Michelangelo was an infant, she became pretty sick. In fact, Michelangelo ended up having to have a wet nurse, so he ended up living with a family of stonecutters. Interestingly, Michelangelo said it was because of this stonecutter wet nurse that he drank in the hammer and chisel. Yeah, not too sure about that one. By the way, did you know Michelangelo didn't want to be known as a painter? In fact, he would probably be insulted if you first referred to him as a painter and not a sculptor.
Seriously, you did not just refer to me as painter, did you?
Like many 16-year-olds, Michelangelo didn't really care for school, so he often would skip class and head to a nearby church to watch the painters. His family detested art and felt like he was a disgrace to the family. It was definitely not a suitable profession for a man. I think once Michelangelo started to make a name for himself as an artist, he loved to remind everybody back home. You can tell since he would always sign his letters home with Michelangelo, sculptor in Rome.
That's right, and don't you forget about it.
After realizing that Michelangelo had some artistic talent, his dad encouraged him to find an apprenticeship where he could learn more about art. He went from a painter's workshop to then studying within a powerful, rich, elite family within Florence, the Medici family. Did I mention they were the rulers of Florence? Yeah, they were. Working with this family gave him special privileges. One of those was being able to study dead bodies at the church waiting to be buried. This fueled his passion to understand human anatomy, and unfortunately, the stench and nastiness of the experience started to make him sick. Enough of that. Just a few short years later, when Michelangelo was only 25 years old, it was apparent he had a black belt in sculpture. After relocating to Rome, one of the cardinals within the Catholic Church commissioned him to create a sculpture. Michelangelo, being pretty cocky at this time, said,
"It will be the most beautiful work in marble Rome has ever seen."
A bit confident, right? Actually, it's this sculpture, La Pietà. Have you ever seen this one before? You bet you have. Check it out. Michelangelo sculpted this from a single piece of marble stone. What amazes me is it only took him 1 year to complete this 6 foot by 6 foot sculpture. Have any idea what the title means? Well, Pietà simply means pity or compassion, which makes sense considering the subject being Christ and his mother Mary. So you're probably asking yourself, what makes this sculpture so incredible? Let me explain. Check out the details in the folds and the ribs and muscles on the body. All this movement these details create. Trying to sculpt these details was incredibly hard. And trust me, people knew it, which is why many pilgrims would come to Rome just to see this sculpture. After returning to Rome, he hears about a sculpture that 2 other artists had abandoned because it was too difficult. Fueled with confidence from La Pietà, he takes over the job. David took 3 years to sculpt, probably due to its size of 17 feet. David quickly becomes the pride of Florence, and they even nicknamed it the Giant. After Michelangelo finishes this sculpture, his fame starts to build. In fact, word got around to the Pope, Pope Julius II. Immediately, Pope Julius commissions Michelangelo to create his tomb. This was huge for Michelangelo, especially since all he wanted to do was sculpt. And designing the tomb for the Pope was a huge honor. Michelangelo is so pumped to get going, he starts gathering a team, pouring the stone needed, and working on his idea. Of course, right in the middle of this, the Pope turns his attention and funding to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica, which was falling apart. You have to keep in mind that Rome has basically turned into a cow pasture at this point. And the Pope wants to return Rome back to its powerful roots. A very Renaissance idea, I might add. Needless to say, he is super frustrated with the Pope. And when he wouldn't pay Michelangelo back for the stone he bought, he heads back to Florence, vowing never to return to Rome. That is until the Pope sends him a request. Have any idea what he's about to ask him to do? That's right, grab your paintbrush and get back to Rome and paint the Sistine Chapel. Let me tell you his response to the Pope.
I do not wish to attend to anything about the tomb and not the painting.
Believe it or not, no one wanted to paint the Sistine Chapel. This wasn't just about the painting process. This also had to do with the chapel itself. Let me school you for a minute. The Sistine Chapel was built in 1477 and was designed to the same biblical proportions as the Temple of Solomon, which made it a fortress. The walls at the base are 10 feet thick, arrow slits added around the outside, and they even added special holes to pour boiling oil out of. Pretty crazy. I bet you didn't know this, but the chapel had been painted before by a team of artists with 32 popes painted around the room. And then a blue field of stars was added to the ceiling. However, not even 21 years after the construction, cracks start to appear in the vault. To stop this from getting worse, in 1504, they placed huge iron rods underneath the floor. Of course, now we have a major problem. The ceiling and the walls must be repaired. After putting some of the Pope's muscle on Michelangelo, he told him he could only work on the tomb if he painted the Sistine Chapel. He reluctantly agrees.
Be sure to check out Part 2, Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel, and PJ2, which we'll be releasing soon. Simply subscribe to our channel here so you get it.
Okay, if you want to finish the story, then go and look for the second part of this. But anyway, as you see, it was a very important characters, the two of them, okay? The two of them were very important. Now let's begin 11:42. We finished already the class, right? Oh my God, can't believe it. Yeah, I finished already, right?